What's going on, everybody? It's GameUnboxingReviews here, and welcome back to another Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 news update. So in today's video, we're of course going to be breaking down all of the new gameplay footage. So without further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so first up we have Miles Morales, the Ultimate Spider-Man. Now I talked a lot about what Miles can do in one of my previous videos, but now we're actually getting to see him in action. And as you'll see from this new gameplay, he is a very acrobatic character that focuses on stunning enemies using his electrical attacks. So Miles has the Web Shooter ability, which allows him to shoot out multiple web blasts. And similar to the original game, you can actually press the action button to shoot out even more webs. Then there's the Surprise Strike ability, which is really cool because it allows Miles to use his famous spider camouflage ability from the comics, which essentially turns him invisible, allowing him to sneak up to an enemy and then shock them with a burst of electricity. There's also the Venom Strike ability, which involves Miles slamming both of his fists into the ground, which then releases a large sphere of electric energy. And finally we have High Voltage Lines, which is my personal favourite of Miles' abilities because it involves him jumping into the air and shooting down multiple web blasts at his enemies, which create these really cool electrified web lines on the ground that electrocute any enemy that is unfortunate enough to come into contact with them. Now when you're playing as Miles, if you hold down B, you'll of course be able to swing around the environment and for as long as you want, which is obviously great news. However, characters that can fly such as Iron Man can only do this for a limited amount of time due to the fact that their power will eventually be drained. Now personally, I'm not a big fan of this decision as I don't recall that kind of restriction ever being in the original games. So hopefully we can at least upgrade our characters to the point where we can fly around as long as we want, because that was always a really fun thing to be able to do in the first two games in the series. We've also now heard Miles speak in the game, and I don't know about you guys, but to me his voice sounds exactly like the voice actor known as Nadji, who is no stranger to this character as he did of course previously voice Miles in Marvel's Spider-Man for PS4.
More of them? Are you serious? How many crazy superpowered prisoners does this stupid place hold?
Next up we have Miss Marvel. So Kamala Khan has the Super Face Kick ability, which as you probably expected allows her to perform a giant lunging kick with an enlarged foot. Then there's the giant Foot Spinny Thing attack where Kamala spins around like a tornado as she kicks everything in sight, and the more you tap the action button the longer she'll spin. We also have the Sweet Combo attack where Kamala unleashes a flurry of punches which you can perform by repeatedly pressing the attack button before she finishes her enemy off with an uppercut attack. And finally there's the Embiggen ability where Kamala enlarges both of her fists and slams them down into the ground, and the name of this ability is also a direct reference to The Simpsons, as Springfield's town motto is of course a noble spirit embiggens the smallest man, Embiggen obviously meaning to make bigger or more expansive. Now before we move on, two other things to mention are that Kamala's idle animation involves her taking a selfie, and if you return to the first level in the game with her on your team, she'll actually say to Ronin the Accuser, "Am I supposed to know who you are?" Which personally I think is a really nice little throwback to the original game, because it was always fun seeing what secret dialogue you would come across if you, say for example, had Spider-Man on your team when you went up against Mysterio. So I'm sure this is just one of many little hidden pieces of dialogue that can be found within this game, which should hopefully give players more of a reason to return to every level with a specific character. Up next we have Hawkeye, a character that we haven't seen any gameplay of until now. So Clint has the Exploding Arrows ability, which you can actually aim by pressing and holding down the attack button, which will then lead Barton to shoot several explosive arrows into the air that then rain down on all nearby enemies, dealing out fire damage. Then there's Shock Value, which allows Clint to shoot electric arrows which deal out extra shock damage to characters in a row. There's also the Scattershot ability, which involves Clint shooting a barrage of explosive arrows at his enemies. And finally we have the Piercing Shot ability, where you hold down the attack button to aim and then pierce the enemies in front of Clint. Also, when Hawkeye dies in the game, he actually says "not like this," which I originally thought was a reference to Switch's famous line from The Matrix, but as you can see here, it's actually a quote that is taken directly from Avengers Volume 1, Issue 502. Now before we move on, Game Informer have also now revealed that Ronin is not in the game, but they also said that they didn't see too many of the game's alternative alternative costumes, so I wouldn't rule out the possibility of Ronin being an unlockable skin for Hawkeye just yet. Moving on, we now have Spider-Gwen. So Gwen has the swing time ability where we see her shoot a web line into the air and repeatedly swing around in a circle as she kicks any enemies that come into contact with her. So again, just like with Kamala, the more you tap the action button, the longer she'll do the attack. Then there's the legit beatdown ability where we see Gwen create a giant ball of webbing and swing it around before throwing it right at her enemies. There's also the Catchy Attack Name ability where, like Miles, Gwen can shoot out multiple web blasts, and you can also repeatedly press the action button to shoot out even more webs. And finally, we have the Disappearing Act ability where you aim where you want Gwen to travel to by holding down the attack button, and once you let go, she'll teleport to wherever you were aiming at as she slams down into the ground. And the teleportation ability could possibly be in reference to a pendant from the comics that is a modified dimensional travel watch. Gwen will also have the same idle animation as Kamala Khan where she whips out a phone and takes a selfie. And last but most certainly not least, we have Wolverine. I wanted to talk about Logan last because despite being one of the game's biggest surprises and one of the most anticipated playable characters, we've barely seen anything from him. So first up, we have the Claw Strike ability. This allows Logan to slash forcefully and then finish off with one last big attack. Then there's the Adamantium Assault ability where Logan jumps and performs a spinning uppercut that draws enemies closer as he attacks them. There's also the Berserker Barrage ability, which you can aim with by holding down the attack button, which will then lead Logan to jump forward while spinning and slashing at anything that's in his way. And last but most certainly not least, we have the Primal Rage ability, which gets Logan angry, and this actually acts as more of a self buff as it increases his attack power for a short amount of time while he glows with rage. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this video. Bit of a late news update, but I wanted to wait until Game Informer had covered all 5 characters before doing this so that I could just talk about everything that they can do in this video. Anyway guys, I want to thank you all very much for watching, and as always, if you'd like to stay up to date with Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, then please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.